Hey guys, Zach here, back from a really hectic holiday season and a lot of travel. I hope you all had safe and good holidays from Thanksgiving through Christmas and New Year's. I wanted to take a few minutes this morning to go ahead and do an update on my collection. I think the last video I made sometime in November maybe even before, was on the Hoback A8, and since that time I've added just about every knife that you've seen here on the table with the exception of the Pretium, which I had just before I got that Hoback in, but I haven't really given it much camera time. I want to just take a few minutes this morning to talk about, just give a brief overview of the more recent acquisitions to my collection and give you kind of an idea of what I'm going to be doing overview videos on in the next few months. So let me just jump right in. We'll start with the Pretium. So I picked up a Pretium off of a trade. I traded my Curtis F3 for this baby. Sometime I think in October. I was selling the F3 because I was looking to get some money to fund some other stuff that I'm actually still waiting on. And Chad Golf from the USN, he actually reached out and asked if I would do a trade. So I said, you know, what the heck. I'd been eyeing these Pretiums anyway, and I missed out on being able to get one. So I figured at very least, if I didn't like it, I could sell it. But alas, I have kept it thus far. Mine is number 32, as you can see there. Just a really nice little flipper. Kind of a unique sound that it makes when it engages there, when the lock engages. Now, if you know anything about the Pretiums, Elliot Williamson at Ferrum Forge made these. He made a run of 100. Every one seems to be a little bit different. There's obviously some CAD work and some CNC work that's happened with these, but the final finish on each one is, I don't think there's any two that are alike, and that makes these kind of special, and that's why I've kind of held on to this one. Not to mention I've gotten on his books for his model number 2. I've got a deposit in on that, and that should be coming sometime in late January, early February. So I'm excited. I'll have kind of the first model and the second model from him. Some of the other ones I've added since then. I got myself a Bodega Field Grade. Now, my original thoughts on the Bodegas, I really liked them, but for 1,000 or whatever they were going for, it just seemed like too fancy of a knife, if you could have such a thing, for me. And I wasn't really interested in over other knives that I wanted to add to my collection and adding one. But when they added the field grades, I thought, hell, that's it's still a very expensive knife. Don't get me wrong, but that's a knife that I could actually get on board with using. Beside the fact that it has jimping, which the standard models do not. And I'm a nut for jimping. I love it. So I put it in order. Maybe beginning of September for my first field grade. It was supposed to be OD green, scallop pattern, and the multi-grind. But what I ended up with, as you could see, I ended up with a high hollow ground in black with the scallop pattern. Kind of the backstory behind that was that I put in my order, and I was a little short on money at the time. So I called up, and Mark, actually, great guy, Mark over there, Mark Begg, called the Begg shop and had him split the payment up. I put 3/4 of it in cash and the rest on my credit card. Well, what happened is somehow my order got kind of lost for a while. And after, I don't know, sometime beginning of December, I reached back out and they said, oh, yeah, I think we lost your order. So I went back and forth and I said, you know, Mark, it doesn't have to be a OD green multi-grind. And I said, there's other ones that I like pretty much all of the different variations that you have. Is there anything else that'd be more immediately available? And he said, well, I actually have a black high hollow ground scallop pattern on the table right here that I'm looking for a home for. And I said, send it on. So they tweaked the detent up. I think it needed a little bit of detent work and sent it on to me, and I couldn't be more happy with this knife. Actually, this has been kind of one of the, I knew that the Begg brothers put out a good knife, and I knew that I wanted to try one out, but I had no idea like just how in love with this knife I would be once I got it. It's one of those for me that I was kind of moderately excited about, but then now that I have it, it's really awesome. I can't see myself getting rid of this one for any reason unless I really needed the money. Just a fantastic flipper. Fantastic. and I'm really digging the high hollow as well. It seems like a lot of guys have been going the multi-ground route, so it's kind of nice to have something a little bit different. Very, very, very high amount of fit and finish on these. And since I ordered this one, I know he's raised the price. I think these are over $700 now, so you know, not a cheap knife for the faint of heart, but really just a beautiful, beautiful piece of craftsmanship. All right, so that's a little bit too much rambling on about the Bodega. You could tell I like it. I also picked up a Jason Clark multi-ground Tanto in zirconium. Now, there's a little bit of story behind all of these, I think, actually. This one, I had a scope, a Vortex Viper PST scope that I was trying to sell and or trade. And Jason actually reached out to me directly since I had one of his knives listed as possible trade. And he said, hey, I'm looking for a scope. I've got some knives that are show pieces that are immediately available. Would you be willing to, you know, to do a trade plus some cash from him to me? And I said, yeah, absolutely. What do you have? And he showed me the ones he had, and he had this multi-ground. Look at that, just beautiful polish, beautiful finish on this knife. Zirconium, and at the time it had a white scale. Now, I'm not really too keen on white G10, so I asked him, I said, if you knock off $50 or whatever of cash you're going to send my way, can you swap that scale out for orange? I kind of been having a feeling that I want to add some orange pieces to my collection. He said, yeah, I can do that. So, alas, I got myself a Jason Clark. Not just the run-of-the-mill either. You know, you can see that this is a multi-ground Tanto in zirconium with the orange G10. His kind of standard locking side for all of his Tantos, at least as far as I can see. Now, these don't flip super hard, but they flip super smooth. You know, and smoothness, I think Carter said it best in one of his videos a month or two ago, that smoothness is kind of relative to what you're thinking of. You know, is smoothness just ease of falling back into place? Is it, you know, there's Emersons that can be smooth, you know, that aren't a flipper at all. But this thing, just so nice. IKBS, of course, so it's loose bearings. Oh, one of the other touches I had Jason add is, again, since I'm a jimping nut, and since the blade was already through heat treat, he couldn't add any jimping to the spine, not without, you know, some effort. So I had him add a little bit of jimping here to the frame. It gives it a good amount of traction, actually, the way he does his jimping. So I added that piece to my collection. Working backward here, more and more recently. Probably this is actually my most recent acquisition. Hinderer XM18 3.5-inch slicer. Now this is my first Hinderer. Direct from Hinderer, and I wanted to get a slicer. I've always kind of liked the slicer or the Wharncliffe, the newer Wharncliffe, better than, or some of his custom work better than the Spanto. And he did a pre-Christmas, like a giveaway, or not really a giveaway, but a mass sell-off. I think it was 100 knives, and his website crashed, and you know, by the time it got back up, it came back suddenly. I had a few different ones in my cart at that time and didn't end up getting anything. So I went for a Wharncliffe, then I went for a slicer, then I went for a Spanto, and ended up with nothing. So I was a little bit perturbed about that. But a couple weeks ago, right before Christmas, they actually did a flash sale of 50. And being that I have Tapatalk and the USN stuff on my phone, I saw it pop up, and I jumped on it immediately. I went for the OJ in slicer. I could have gotten actually a Wharncliffe in a different color. I wasn't really realizing that in some colors he had Wharncliffe available, and that would have been my preferred grab, but I can't really complain. I just got one in my cart and got checked out as fast as possible, so I didn't run into another issue of it getting pulled from my cart and so on. Now these, as everybody knows, they don't have the best detent. It takes a little bit of, I mean, they're smooth. They ride on the Teflon washer. And just, you know, I'm not trying to knock on Hinderer at all, but those of you guys that know Hinderer and have owned Hinderers, you know, and I felt them before I owned this one, so I wasn't unaware of the situation. The detents are not very strong. so they don't flip very well on their own. They don't flip like this Bodega where I can hold it just about any way and it comes flying out and locks in with zero wrist action. These Hinderers require this little wrist flip, and that's not a big deal to some, and to some that's a complete deal breaker. There is a way to, and I'm not condoning you do this in any way, but there is a way to ream out the detent hole in the blade just a little bit, and that'll allow the detent ball to set further into the blade, which will make these into a better flipper. I may or may not do that. I'm gonna see just, you know, what I feel about it after I carry it for a little while. But again, I went with OJ, so I'm gonna be adding some OJ pieces to my collection. The fit and finish on these, of course, is Hinderer perfect. Lockup is perfect. Everything is perfect. The detent is the only downside to these knives. Maybe that's a downside to you, maybe not. Also, my wonderful girlfriend got me a small Sebenza in ladder Damascus carbon fiber. This is the Blade HQ exclusive, and this, I wasn't really keen, to be honest with you, on the small Sebenzas, and you know, I always kind of go towards a little bit of larger knife, 3.5 inch or bigger, but this is really a beautiful knife, really beautiful. You can see that the lock bar and the clip are actually his standard stonewash, and the rest is high polish around those carbon fiber inlays, not to mention ladder Damascus. This is kind of a showpiece. I don't think I'll be carrying this at all, but it actually came the sharpest of any, and I've owned quite a few, maybe 3 or 4 Chris Reeve knives. This one came with an absolute mirror polish on the edge. It was the sharpest Chris Reeve offering that I've ever owned, so just really blew me away. I mean, completely unaware, perfect gift for a knife nut, you know, and for people who don't know a lot about custom knives and the high-end production knife world, for her to go, you know, out of her way to kind of find and pick this out without really any, you know, any gesturing from me that I wanted to add this to my collection. And actually, I didn't really have one of these in mind, being a small Sebenza, but now that I have it, it's really quite nice. Unfortunately, now that I have the small, I want to add the large carbon fiber, the big brother to it, in plain or in Damascus or something, so I have a matching pair. Maybe add the Knife Art all carbon fiber one also. And she kind of opened up a can of worms for me on that, making me kind of wish I hadn't sold my Umnums, to be honest with you. But just, you know, Reeve perfect. Late lockup like most Reeves, but really easy to disengage. Really small and gentleman-like. I know I've been jumping around here on the table, but I had a couple extra bucks, of course. When a knife nut has a couple extra bucks, they burn a hole in their pocket. And picked up an Aaron Frederick, my first Aaron Frederick from Monkey Edge. Now, Monkey Edge is local to me here in Arizona land, near Phoenix. And I've seen his knives quite a bit, but I decided I would finally get one. The price was kind of right. This one, I believe, was $325. And upon further investigation, this is the first Tanto that he's done. This is his SMK, Standard Mark issue line, and he makes this in drop point, in recurve, and I'm not a really big fan of recurves if you've been watching my videos. And I'm coming around on Tantos. I'm really starting to want to add Tantos to my collection. So for $325, you get a titanium bolster, titanium frame lock, hand ground blade, and carbon fiber inlay here, or onlay. And I think that's really just a fantastic price. I think these are S35 VN. That's just a fantastic price for a fairly, you know, for basically a custom knife. Now, what makes it so cheap? You know, how is he able to make these at that price point? Well, talking to Aaron, I think he said that he doesn't make very much money on these at all. He just really wanted to offer some custom type work at an affordable price. And the way you can tell is there's just little things, you know, like you could see that in the lock bar here, it's slightly overcut. Same here. The edges aren't, they're not sharp, but they're not beveled on the locking side. The clip is just a standard bent over tie clip. The lockup is kind of late. You know, you've got about a 80% lockup on this. When I got this knife, it had a little bit of lock rock, and I'm not trying to knock him in any way, but I just added a little bit more tension to the lock bar, and it fixed it right up. You can see that the lockup is a bit late. I reached out to Aaron. He said that, you know, if I had a problem with it, send it back and he would fix it for free. So not an issue, not knocking the guy at all. One other little mod that I did, and I'll get into this more when I do a video on this. This corner right here, and a lot of knife makers kind of neglect this. This corner right here by the lockup, where the lock has been cut out, was sharp. You know, it was a sharp square corner. So I just took a file to it and knocked it off, and now it's perfectly comfortable. But really, you know, for 300 bucks or 325, you know, you can't get a much nicer knife. I mean, look at the grind on this thing. Just such a nice grind, and, you know, nice hand satin finish. So Aaron Frederick, I know he isn't, you know, one of the more popular makers at the moment, but I don't always just follow every trend that's out there with their big beefy folders. I kind of go with my own taste and what I like to add to my collection. So I think I've been rambling on here for probably far enough. If there's any of these that you want to see an overview video on sooner than later, post in the comments below. I've been neglecting my comments ever since YouTube did the updates. I've been kind of dreading going on there and going to my Gmail and figuring out who's commented on videos and replying. But I'm going to promise you I will do a better job as my New Year's resolution of getting back into YouTube and making more vids and putting out some good content for you guys. Oh yeah, lastly, I've added this this Dark Sucks Alpha pen. Might do a little brief video on this at some point too. But without further rambling or other BS from me, I will sign off, and I will be in touch with you guys and putting videos out in the next few weeks. Have a good one. Talk to you later.